Good morning. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Joyful Christian Hermit. I've got some Irish in me, but then they moved over to Scotland early on, way back. But I had 100% Irish spiritual father, Father Fahey, and he foretold he would pass on St. Patrick's Day. Years in advance, he foretold it. And sure enough, this morning, 5:30 Eastern Time, 5:38 Eastern Time, he passed back in the Midwest. So, 6 years, a toast to my spiritual da with my protein drink. Today, I thought a big tip. I woke up sick with pain, nausea, dizzy, just gut from the lumbar, mid-spine, neck, feet, down the legs, all over. And my cataracts are growing, so it's harder to see. I've been wearing these just over Costco glasses, trying to help. Then I thought, well, give Aunt Marilou a try, because she, years ago had told me if I would put a little makeup on, I would feel better. Well, I think I look more garish. No. I looked so awful this morning that it was sort of scary to look at. I've got this one mirror, and I was gray as my sweater and dark, though my eyes sunken and they're all red, and I'm trying to open them up and clear them up. So I thought, well, we'll give that a try in honor of Aunt Marilou. Then I put this on. This will go to granddaughters, but I didn't know if they'd want this. I've given them all my best stuff so far. And then my mother loved this ring. She went, they moved to Arizona for retirement, just rented out there. First visited friends and then rented for a couple of weeks, then 6 weeks. And my mother so wanted to get out of the hometown. They were both born there, grew up there, lived there. And my mom needed some adventure. So I remember they visited us when I was still married, and we had this nursery school house. And they were there, and they were going to head over to rent again. But they visited us first, and then we're going to, I think they drive. They made a drive, driven across country, and then we're going to drive over to Arizona, to Green Valley. They liked Green Valley. And my dad talked to me. He wanted my advice. It amazed me. Because being the youngest, it was always usually the eldest one that he was. And she had married well, lots of money, and really looked to her. Then my next sister he was closest to emotionally. And then me. It was a little bit, I was flaky for him, I think. Oh, I don't know. But he wanted my advice. He says, your mother wants to buy there, and why would she? And I just said she wants adventure. And me being very blunt and honest and saw right into a lot of it. My dad's dad lived in the hometown, and he had had a rough time during the Depression and never could get a job. It was just one bad luck story after another for my grandfather. And he had been a banker from a great family, and the banks folded, and that his job was gone. He tried an investment in Texas in the oil fields with a friend, and the friend took advantage. Well, it was actually a relative, a brother-in-law, and got ripped, got done in, lost whatever money he had left, The rental house they had burned down. It was just, or maybe they owned, anyway, they lost everything. And he was gone like 2 to 3 years from the family trying to get rich with the Texas oil fields that were just a bogus fraud that he'd gotten involved with that he didn't know, didn't realize, of course. And and then his wife died of a aneurysm at age 58, just about 59. And that really just tanked him. And he started drinking and drinking more, and he never pulled out. So his children, they rented a little place for him. And actually, it was in one of the homestead homes. Somebody else had bought it, and he had a little apartment behind it he lived in. And that was until he was 90, and he passed when he was 90. And despite all that drinking. And he was deceased then. And I told my dad, I said, Mom doesn't want you guys to just live there and end up sort of being like Granddad, just drinking. Or my dad wouldn't have drank. I didn't say drinking, but I said like Granddad, and just living out his days there in Huntington, having didn't do anything, didn't have friends, was a hermit in an unhealthy way, not a religious hermit, but very intelligent. He'd go to the library and get books and just read all the time. Read and drank, would go to the VFW and drink, and it was very sad. So that, my dad, he just sort of like, whoa, when I said she doesn't want you all to end up just living there with no experiences, no adventure in your life, just the same like Granddad. And that did it. My mom got her wish, and once they bought a small place, and then they sold their home in the town. For a while they had 3 places. Then they eventually sold the lake house, and I wish they hadn't. I thought I would never get out of California, so I discouraged that I could do that. But a year later than I did, of course, that would have been a wonderful thing for my children and a great investment. But whatever, can't look back. But he loved it there. They bought a larger home, a permanent home, and later, and he never wanted to go back to Huntington. So anyway, it was quite something. They had their adventures, and my mom loved the culture of the Native Americans there, and she even got Dad involved in volunteering, and of course he played golf. He could play golf every day, and they entertained. He loved entertaining, and so did she. So hostessing. So they had a great life there their last 24 years. But Mom had this ring made by someone there in Green Valley, turquoise stone. I've never worn it. I got it out this morning. I just felt I needed my mother. I needed just her strength, and my dad had strength. And I woke up also thinking, how fortunate. They were sort of hard, weren't to show emotions a lot. Crying was a no-no. We're not to cry. And buck up, be strong, pull through, push through. And if I hadn't been reared like that, who knows what I'd be like today, And my aunt, if you'd put some makeup on, you'd feel better. Well, maybe I do. In honor of Aunt Mary Lou, I put my mask on, my costume mask. And then I thought of a neighbor in our hometown. And because I read this old Irish blessing somebody had posted today. This old Irish blessing. So let me read it to you. You're going to love this story, and it's for real. My glasses on. May the road rise, and it says popular Irish blessing, traditional. What a joke. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, the rain fall soft upon your fields, and until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. So I'm sure you've heard that. It's very popular. And I went to a college in my state and was home on vacation. It was Christmas break, and we had dorm buddies, and my secret dorm buddies. And my dorm buddy had given me a little plaque. I have it somewhere around here. The old Irish blessing. And our neighbor man, Dale Francis, and his wife came over. His daughter I think she married. She'd gone to college a year or two out in South Dakota and met someone and married out there, Mary Ann. They had a younger daughter, Rita Kay. But he and his wife came over. My mom had him over for supper, dinner or something. And I was there and I was showing him. He was always so kind and interested in others, and Dale and Margaret too, lovely people. And he had been a Methodist minister and had converted to Catholicism. So that was unique. And he'd written his autobiography. My mom and dad had it. And it was amazing. They really liked the Francises. My parents did. Just loved them dearly. Felt very close. See how... But yet my parents were so anti-Catholic. Of course, they never said a word to, the Francises. And they grew up with there was another couple that they knew. And in fact, my aunt, who was reared by the same mom and dad as my dad, she grew up and was best friends with a Catholic girl. So see how they would have these ingrained anti-Catholic beliefs and stories they'd hear, and Catholics worship Mary and all this, and then pray to saints. Never would get it that it was asking them to pray for us. So anyway, just like we'd ask people to pray for us, it's what we do, ask those who are on the other side and alive to pray for us. But anyway, so I was showing Dale the little plaque that I'd gotten. We were just, talking, and my mom, I think they were talking with Margaret, and Mom was getting things ready, and by then my sisters weren't home. They were married, in fact. So older sisters. So Dale said, "You'd be sort of surprised who wrote that." And I says, "Oh, well, it says unknown, old somebody unknown." And he said, well, I'll read what I wrote. After he died, I wrote a tribute to him that I sent it to the newspaper just to put in a letter to the editor. And the editor, Mike Perkins, he liked it so well, he made a column of it. And Dale had done the history makers for the town column for several years, and I got his position. They asked me to take it then. But then I found out I was being grossly mistreated to the point, and in fact, I think it was Dale who tipped me off from the other side, that they were taking gross advantage of me financially. And I put hours and hours each week into research and writing people of the history of the town, and asked for equity. And I did even half of what Dale had been paid per column. No, they wouldn't. So that was the end of history makers for them. And people I never told people why, but one person figured it out. Anyway, it says here, writer stopped by my office last week, shortly after Dale Francis died. She had written a tribute to Dale, but there was a catch. For a number of personal reasons, she insisted that her name not appear with what she had written. I'm always been like that. I'm too self-conscious. Since our letters to the editor policy forbids signing letters with pseudonyms, it couldn't go there. As I read what she had written, I was reminded of many things I'd known about Dale Francis, and I found out a few things too. The writer, a former neighbor and later a good acquaintance of Dale's, was speaking from the heart in a way that also spoke for many of us who knew and admired the man. The following can't be a letter to the editor, but in my column, I can make the rules and it fits here. I just wish she could have the byline. Well, I don't care about that stuff. This was what I had written. I had my children read the newspaper article about Dale Francis, all the things he had done, his obituary. They had heard me speak of him many times, but I wished to write about who Dale Francis is. I remember when the Francises moved to Huntington, I was intrigued by the vintage taxi they drove. They had this taxi. It's great. Rita was a toddler, Mary Ann my age. We were in junior high when they moved there. And Margaret and Dale, the most beatific couple I'd met. My parents admired them in a way that made an impact on me. When I was heading off to college, it was a plaque that somebody had given me to going off to college. That's what, I don't even remember my own story. Well, I'm old. I'm as old as Dale. Well, nearly. I think he was 76. I've got a couple years to go. When I was heading off to college, Dale happened to notice a plaque a friend had given me, an old Irish verse. He said, "You'd be surprised to know the old Irish verse is actually fairly new." He laughed quietly in his humble manner and explained that he wrote that verse and read it at the conclusion of each of his radio broadcasts when he was in, actually, his daughter later corrected, I thought it was North Carolina. It was in Ohio, I think Lima, Ohio, when he had a radio broadcast there. Around St. Patrick's Day, a couple of years later, he heard an announcer on another station read the verse, saying it was an old Irish blessing, author unknown. My narcissistic reaction was, "You should get the royalties for that." Oh, I mean, he would have been a multi-millionaire. It's on everything, you know. But Dale smiled, his intense blue eyes sparkling, and said, "I guess I could have, but I have plenty." Don't you suppose people enjoy it more, thinking it is very old? It is a very old blessing. The Irish blessing plaque has moved with me 17 times. And now we can add on maybe another 6 more times minimum. Its significance told to many. In James 3:13, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show it by his good life, by his deeds done, in the humility that comes from wisdom." This is Dale Francis. A couple of years later, tragedy struck our town. The magnificent Dr. D. Richard Gill suffered a fatal brain tumor. They lived across the street. See, the Francises lived next door to where my parents had built a house in after the childhood home I'd grown up in. When I was a freshman in high school, we moved into this new house. The Francises moved in, and the Gills already had moved in across the street and down a house. And he was a doctor in the town, a wonderful doctor. They had 5 children. I babysat for them a lot. It was nice. It was fun. And later, when I became Catholic, and when people in the town, in the parish, were going against me after the soup kitchen thing, his widow, Anna, became my best friend for a couple or 3 years until I moved out of town. And she understood I needed to get out. It was getting so bad what they were saying about me and things, and she was horrified how I was being treated. Also, she knew me. Anyway, the tribute Dale Francis wrote to honor Dr. Gill moved the hearts of all who read it. Dale and Dick were dear friends, and Dale's inspired words held a power that impressed upon me not only Dale's great authorship, but also the beauty, compassion, and depth of Dr. Gill. Now I see that Dale captured an essence of himself as well as of Dr. Gill. Good citizen, good Catholic, good husband, good father, great simplicity, good man. Saints. They're saints. We knew it. We all knew it. For many years I was away from town, but just 4 years ago I had a vivid dream, I forgot about this, in which I visited Dale Francis. And that was before, it was as an adult when I was out in California, stuck out there with a terrorizing ex-husband and 3 little children in my back room. I hadn't spoken with him since leaving town. That would have been, I don't know how many years prior. 15? The dream had such impact that I called him long distance. He remembered me, although I was an insignificant person out of the many important people he knew. Well, he was an editor at our Sunday Visitor for a long time. And I think he did a lot with book acquisitions and things for our Sunday Visitor. Big Catholic, National Catholic Publishing Company. We shared similar health problems, but he had bad back pain too. But he mostly spoke to me of my long-time dream of writing. We exchanged a couple of letters in spite of his demanding writing schedule. In his book, Caring is Living, which was available at our library, Dale writes, "But we can care, we can reach out our lives toward others. We can learn to weep when another is hurt, feel the humiliation when another suffers indignities. We can learn to care. We must learn to care, for only in caring do we really live." That was his quote in his book, one of many. This is Dale Francis. In the last 2 years, Dale suffered. He was not stymied by pain, however. Years before, he lost his first wife to Hodgkin's disease, and his only son, Guy, was born brain damaged. But lately, he had endured severe back pain and surgery, excruciating eye pain, and survived 2 heart attacks. It was his heart that finally got him. As synchronicity would have it, I felt the nudge to call him a few days ago. We actually I'd moved back and lived maybe 2 blocks away in the same kind of subdivision. And ironically, I could have had the house that my parents had had. And I probably should have, but they had a pool. The people who bought it after my parents put a pool in, and I feared that during one of my pain sieges, where I'd be in bed, not, unable to function, my children, somebody would drown in the pool. My son he was little, he was maybe 8 then, and hit his head and drown or something. I just, that did it. I couldn't have a house with a pool. Later, I realized I could have just had the pool filled in. My kids wouldn't have liked it. But anyway, and I also thought I needed to have my own, not be where my parents were, not feel like I was going back to a younger time period. I needed to live my life as an adult and own all that had transpired in my life. So, anyway, I just had this urge to call him. I didn't realize that he was doing poorly. Amazingly, he had just reread one of my letters I'd written 4 years prior, and I asked about his work. He was still writing 3 columns a week. He chuckled, saying his body was crumbling as bodies my age do. Never a complaint, always an encouragement. This is Dale Francis. That was the last I spoke with him. However, a few nights before Dale joined our Lord, I was blessed by another dream in which he bequeathed the importance of writing in order to help others live a godly life. His own book sums it up. I forgot this. I should get my journals out and reread them. I had so many dreams and guidance from God that way. That probably helped me. I'm stymied right now a little bit. So anyway, he had rewritten that letter, one of the letters, and he was encouraging me still to write. This was what he said, though. We shouldn't die of our disabilities. We should die from living in joy and usefulness. That was Dale Francis, living in joy and usefulness. As I look at Dale's old Irish blessing, I think he would wish the thoughts into reality for each one of us. He loved the Lord his God with all his heart, soul, and strength, and he loved his neighbors, all of mankind. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. And until we meet again, Dale Francis, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. So, see, there's a saint. Lived right next door to me when I was in high school and college, and after. My parents were there for years after. They were there when my dad got stabbed by his longtime best friend. They were best friends since he was 3, who had this big company that my dad worked for and had worked his way up to, he worked commission and had a great salary. And then they changed it to flat salary. And right in the last, well, he would have kept working, no, so it's sort of good. My dad retired earlier then. He retired when he was 63 and a half. He kept working. He remained friends with his best friend. But I'd never seen my dad like that before, and he never said a bad word about his best friend, whose family owned that company, and his best friend was president of it. And he sold it to a big corporation, to American Standard. And part of the deal was, cutting down the salaries to make a better sale for himself, this best friend. And that's when my dad's salary got put, instead of commission, on this flat salary, which was a pittance of what my dad had worked. For 52 years he worked for that company, worked his way up. Long hours out on the road, away from his family, to provide, and he was an excellent salesman, but that's my dad. He never said a bad word. I'm not like that. I'm very critical, and I'm very blunt and outspoken. My mom was more outspoken. But anyway, so Dale Francis, what a saint. What a saint, And he wouldn't want to be canonized at all. Not at all. Actually, they also, after he died, his daughter gave me his rosary. And my spiritual father wanted it. It was a couple of years later, and he put me to a test. And I had been on a pilgrimage or something, and I put out different things. And it was also in my pocket, and that happened to be out. And he said, I want that. Well, I also had my Irish. I had gotten this before I was Catholic because I wanted to learn the rosary. It was 5 years before I became Catholic, so I got this from an Irish catalog. It's Connemara marble beads. And this has a little story with it. Miracle with it. Anyway, a blessing from God with this. But my spiritual da, who's 100% Irish, didn't want this. No, he wanted Dale. He knew of Dale Francis. He wanted that rosary. Well, he didn't really want. He had all kinds of rosaries. My spiritual da did. That's how, see, this story's all coming together, because I was thinking of my spiritual father this morning, that he passed 6 years ago today. And then I thought of that old Irish blessing, old, quote, quote, and Dale. And dug around in the filing cabinet until I could find that article. My mom kept anything that was published of me in the little local newspaper, So anyway, it was a test of me to detach, holy indifference. And I never got it back. But Dale had wanted me to pray for his daughter, who had left the church really shortly after she married, or when she married. And that was, I think, the significant. He'd probably given the rosary to that daughter to give to me before he died in the hospital, and to pray for her. She didn't know that, but I knew, because in that call that I just happened to want to talk to him, and he had just read my letter, and I had been thinking of him, and he had no idea he was going to have his fatal heart attack, be in the hospital and die, and I didn't either. But he told me that, would I please pray for Marianne to come back to the church. So I need to do that today, specifically. And so it's just an emotional day for me, in a way, which pain always makes me more emotional when I feel worse and worse, and have it, get tempted by the evil one to get overwhelmed by all that I'm into here. And then here's this reminder of my writing, though. I need to get to writing. I really do. And I thought, even if it takes me another year to get things straightened out in here, I can still start writing. And then who knows, God may give me another year to write. I shouldn't think negatively at all. Positivity, faith, have faith, have faith, have faith. And, or maybe there's writing in heaven in some way, shape, or form. So that's Dale Francis, and that's saints. Saints. Holy people. Holy, holy, holy. And beautiful people that we know in life. Isn't it wonderful? And that Irish blessing. I think I took a picture of it on my phone to read it again. Don't you find that fun? That here's this old Irish blessing. It's not old at all. May the road rise. And I'm going to dig around. I have to get out to the garage to find it. But they also gave me, after he passed, this big Afghan that had, how they have the printing woven in, and it's green and white, and it's the Irish blessing. See, that's Dale's sense of humor, because he told me that privately, that Christmas break from my freshman year in college, or right before I left it was, I guess. Yes, that's what I wrote here. So, and it's got that Irish blessing on it. And I was thinking about removing this gets so much fuzz on it, this pet blanket. Put the pet blanket down at the bottom of the bed for the dogs. And I'll use, for my blanket, Dale and Margaret's Irish blessing Afghan they gave me. It has the Irish blessing on it. And that will remind me of my spiritual da also. and remind me of my mom and dad's wonderfully close friendship with Dale and Margaret. In fact, I think they went out to Arizona to visit them there, and they would go up to the lake house to visit with my parents, and humble, wonderful people. Margaret was the second wife, and then they had a little girl, Mary Kay, or Rita Kay. Mary Ann was the daughter that Dale had with his first wife who passed away. And it was the first wife who was Catholic, and eventually then Dale converted to Catholicism. And Guy, their son, passed. He was very disabled, handicapped from being born with brain damage. And then when Dale married Margaret, they had a child, Rita Kay. And Rita Kay's married and living in the Midwest and has children. And I lost track of Mary Ann. She's out west, probably not too far away. And I shouldn't have, but we were writing to each other after her dad passed, and I got too intense on Catholicism with her, which is a mistake. We shouldn't do that. I was very, very zealous and hoping that she would come back to the church, and wrote too much in our emails. I wrote too much about the church, and it turned her off. So let that be a warning. But I'm going to pray the rosary today for Dale, for his intentions, and as a thank you to him. I had my little card company when I was in Southern California. My little Potpourri Publishing made my little hand-printed cards, and he was so kind. He sent them to a publisher he knew, but they weren't interested in my little homespun cards. So, but anyway, it's interesting, isn't it? I bet you guys didn't know that wasn't an old ancient anonymous Irish blessing. Would have been written in maybe the late 50s or early 60s. I think it was his radio show that he had in Lima, Ohio. Oh. I love stuff like that. I really do. Surprises and humility and hiddenness. He was anonymous, very anonymous, and is very content in humility, and he knew love. He knew, and Margaret too, just how to be so loving. And Mary Ann is so much like her dad. So maybe I'll try to, I don't know if I can find Mary Ann online or not. Apologize. When you're a converts, they say, can be the worst. And I was just so, oh my goodness, I had fallen in love like never before. And it all was, it was just like all was so new. And it was just so glorious. The treasure chest of the Catholic Church. And then, of course, we find things in the treasure chest that, like digging through family history, you'd sort of rather not know about, like how they ended up. It was Pope John the 15th who was the one that decided he was going to take control over who was going to be a saint and who wasn't, and develop the process. Well, he had a good idea, probably, or he was probably a leader. Yeah, organizational leadership type, autocratic, and believed in structure more than management by objective, Management by objective would be what's the best way to have somebody know who's a saint? Well, the people who know them best are the best way. Leave it to the people. And don't make it, and he had no idea it would become such a status thing. that they would charge all this money for it and all that, and then it becomes such a big deal to have somebody in a family or a son be a saint. Imagine that. And that's too bad. See, that's why I read about it was a 50-year wait was the original waiting period to be a saint. You had to at least be 50 years to see. See, then a lot of the immediate family and friends were no longer around. And that would be to start the process. And then, so you wouldn't have the egos involved and the made up stories, like things about Rose of Lima. Some of the quote unquote miracles weren't at all. They were enthusiastic neighbors being interviewed, making up things or exaggerating because they wanted to have a saint. It'd become a big deal. And that's the problem when things become an ego thing. Even though it's not the saint's fault, the saint doesn't want to be a saint. Saint is not at all interested. They're sanctified by God. They don't care if they're going to be sanctified by a pope or anything, or approved or all that. And it's the same with hermits. God's approval is more than sufficient for any hermit, but not for the diocese hermits. It's not enough. They want the bishop's approval. So, and to be legal, to be noticed, to be recognized and respected in the church, and to have a place. See. So I don't know if Dale minded that. I don't think he minded that I let the cat out of the bag. I think it adds to the enjoyment of the old Irish blessing. And I did. I loved it how he chuckled. He says, don't you think people find it more fascinating this way? And indeed they have. Indeed they have. So even my saying this, it's not, people aren't gonna, they won't want to believe it, or they'll just discount it. It is true. We like romanticism, and not the eros, but romantic notions, the unusual, I find this more so. God bless His real presence in us. Remember what Dale said, it's all about caring and love, caring for one another. It's what Jesus says.